Welcome in, everyone, for another deep dive. And this one really got me thinking. It's President Bonnie H. Cordon's talk from April 2023, Never Give Up an Opportunity to Testify of Christ.
Mm,
And, we usually hear testify and we think like bearing our testimonies in church, formal settings.
right.
But President Cordon shares this experience, and it just makes you look at the whole idea differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how she starts with this really personal story. She's serving her mission. She gets a call.
Mm.
Imagine that, thousands of miles away from home. And it's her dad telling her he's been diagnosed with ALS.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's got to hit you hard, being so far away during a time like that.
And in that moment of everything going on, her father says something so profound. He tells her, never give up an opportunity to testify of Christ.
And you might think, okay, in that situation, he'd be focused on other things, but this message obviously stuck with her.
It did. It became a guiding principle for her life. And what's so interesting is she doesn't interpret it as this big grand gesture.
Yeah.
It's woven into everyday life.
Yeah.
It's realizing that every choice, every interaction we have, it's all an opportunity to reflect Christ's teachings.
So we're talking more than just words here. It's like actively living the gospel in every aspect of our lives.
Think about the Nephites in 3 Nephi 11.
Okay.
After witnessing Christ's death, they were desperate to experience his resurrected reality firsthand. They didn't want secondhand accounts. They wanted that personal connection.
Right. They understood that true faith is more than just knowing the stories. It's about having those personal experiences that testify of Christ.
And that's exactly what she's getting at. She wants us to have that same yearning, that same desire to truly know Christ for ourselves today.
Mm-hmm.
And she even shares these incredible stories about two young women, Livy and Maddie, who did just that.
Yes. Livy's story really stuck with me. She talks about listening to the general conference, but like passively.
Right.
And then she makes this decision to really engage, to listen for revelation. And it changes everything for her.
It's amazing how just a shift in intention can make such a difference. It's like she went from being a spectator in the stands to an active participant on the field.
Totally. And then there's Maddie, who faced a completely different challenge.
Yeah.
Her family stopped going to church, but she had this undeniable pull to stay connected.
And what's so inspiring about Maddie is her unwavering faith. I mean, even at a young age, she understood what brought her peace and had the courage to act on it, even when it was hard.
And that really highlights something crucial, doesn't it?
It shows us that even when those around us stray, holding on to our faith can not only strengthen us, but it can inspire them to return.
It's like a ripple effect, huh? Her commitment ends up impacting her whole family. And that actually makes me think about another part of President Cordon's message, this idea of holy habits.
Yes, it's so easy to fall into a routine with things like going to the temple, fasting, praying. We check them off the list. But she challenges us to see them as something much deeper.
So instead of just going through the motions, we need to find that real connection with Christ through these habits.
Exactly. She even talks about feasting on the Spirit when she's talking about fasting.
Oh, I love that. Because it's not about deprivation then. It's actively seeking spiritual nourishment.
Right.
It reminds me of how I feel after I have like a really delicious home-cooked meal, nourished and satisfied.
Exactly. And it's the same with prayer.
Mm-hmm.
It's about shifting from those rote recitations to really counseling with the Lord, truly opening ourselves up to his guidance.
Mm-hmm. Being present, really listening instead of going through the motions. I know for me, when I approach prayer that way, it makes all the difference.
It does.
Yeah.
It's in those moments when we're fully engaged that those holy habits become so much more than routines.
Yeah.
They become powerful testimonies in themselves.
And that just feels so important today, with so much vying for our attention.
Absolutely. There's this constant noise and distraction. It's hard to hear anything, let alone the still small voice of the Spirit.
Right.
President Cordon uses this interesting analogy. She talks about building a muscle memory of discipleship.
So the more we practice aligning our lives with Christ's teachings, the more natural it becomes to turn to him, even when things get tough.
Precisely. It's about strengthening that connection to the point where it's instinctual, where seeking him is our automatic response, even amidst chaos.
You know what? That really resonates with me. It's like when I first started running, it was a conscious effort every step.
Right.
But now, like years later, it's just something my body does. It's become a muscle memory.
Exactly. It's that same principle applied to our spiritual lives.
Yeah.
The more we practice turning to Christ, the more ingrained it becomes in who we are.
And isn't that what it boils down to?
Huh?
Really never giving up an opportunity to testify of Christ? It's about cultivating that connection,
Yeah.
making it so natural to turn to him.
Yeah, it's like we're rewiring our spiritual DNA,
Right.
training ourselves to respond to life the way Christ would.
It's interesting because it takes us back to President Cordon's father and his words. It wasn't just about giving talks or, quoting scriptures.
Right.
He was talking about something deeper.
Absolutely. It's about the kind of faith that just permeates everything we do. It's about how we treat others, the integrity we show at work, those quiet acts of service we do without expecting anything in return.
Letting those actions speak for themselves
Exactly.
about who we are.
And you know what's so powerful about this message? She doesn't just leave us with this ideal. She offers this invitation, a call to action.
Okay.
She says, look for Christ everywhere. I promise he is there.
Wow.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's like she's saying, even when we doubt if we're seeking him, those little glimpses of his love are all around us.
It reminds me that we don't need to wait for this big heroic moment to testify of Christ.
Right.
It's the everyday interactions, those small acts of kindness, those moments when we choose compassion over judgment. I think that's where our faith really shines through.
So as we're wrapping up here, I keep coming back to that question. What does it look like to really embrace those opportunities to testify of Christ in our everyday lives?
It's a question worth thinking about, a challenge worth accepting. Because it's in those small moments and the choices we make that we have the power to really make his love known, share his light, and truly become living testimonies of his reality.
That's a beautiful thought. Thank you so much for diving deep with us today, everyone. We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.